primary ignition.
Hello, welcome to the 50th episode of the Unifying Force. I'm Kat, joined by Gio and Dave. How is everybody?
Hey, doing very well.
Very happy that we made it to the big 5-0. That seems pretty cool.
I know. It does not seem like, it both seems like the number should be more than that, but because we're every other week and we've had some breaks, like Kat and I were talking earlier, we've been doing this for over 2 years.
Yeah. And it's a product of lockdown and the pandemic, which is crazy because potentially none of the virtual Cantina would have even come together if the lockdown hadn't happened. That's how we were all bored and typing away on Facebook.
Well, we definitely wouldn't have the amount of content, I think, that we do without that. So, I challenge those people that said nothing good came out of those years. The Unifying Force.
Yeah, my friends learned to bake banana bread, whatever that is. And I learned about the YouTubes and the Facebook Lives and the broadcasting and talking about many things, which we'll get into. So shall I go?
Yeah, let's
go. Okay. Yeah, so we kind of teased a little bit of having some kind of podcast style structure where we have a couple of regular segments. And I wanted to make them Star Warsian themed, but I don't listen to other Star Wars podcasts enough to know if these are already games that have been stolen, or used. So without meaning to sound like I've stolen ideas or names of segments from other podcasts or discussion shows, I'd like to start with what I like to call news from the HoloNet. So the HoloNet is the distribution information source in the galaxy, far, far away. And there are always updates going on around Lucasfilm, Disney, Star Wars, and then tangentially around the film industry and TV and movies. So what's been happening in the last 4 weeks in terms of globally the industry and how it might relate to Lucasfilm? I think we had another Lucasfilm property go for its 5th and maybe final ever run this year. And I haven't seen it yet.
I will believe final ever run when I see it. Because I think, if we know anything about the way Disney rolls, is we will bring something back around and we will reinvent it, or we will do something with it when we have no other ideas. So I don't know how long it will take or what will happen, but I think this is not the last that we have seen of Dr. Jones.
Well, Catherine, what do you think? Last week's scene?
Definitely not the last time you're going to see. It's an IP. It's a profitable IP. The last one notwithstanding, for obvious reasons. It's going to be rebooted, and maybe not in Harrison's lifetime, but it'll happen at some point down the line.
Yeah. I mean, one of the best parts of Indiana Jones, I feel, that is underrated and lots of people don't know about it, is the young Indiana Jones stuff. I love those things. They used to come on Sunday mid-morning, kind of 10, 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning on BBC 2. in the 90s, and I caught quite a few of them. And I thought the guy who played young Indiana Jones was great. He kind of reminded me of, I don't really know the actor's name, but he reminded me of a young Chris Pine in his kind of affect.
Was
and
it
the way
Sean Patrick
Flattery? Okay. Oh, really? It was him. Yeah. He looks quite different now.
And because it was a different actor in the movie. It was River Phoenix in the movie, was it not?
Yeah, at the beginning of Last Crusade. Yeah. And he had a tragic end, of course. The whole Phoenix family has a kind of tough beginning. But I mean, just speaking tangentially of Star Wars, Joaquin Phoenix I saw in a trailer for Napoleon by Ridley Scott, and he would be a fantastic Darth Bane. I'm just going to put that out there. I've not read the Darth Bane trilogy. I'm trying to get hold of the reprinted version because I really like the new artwork even more than the original EU one. Sorry, whoever drew the original Darth Bane. Like Path of Destruction, where he looks kind of really, really gothic emo. That book, I never really liked the appearance of Darth Bane, and I'll be honest, I judge books by their covers. Hey, look, like this book was always going to get bought because it's a great rendition of Mara Jade.
Well, it absolutely is a great rendition.
Yeah, and I this is actually my newest addition to my Star Wars library. But I'm not going to read it until I've read, I think, Allegiances and Outbound Flight, which are also by Timothy Zahn and cover that kind of Dawn of the Rebellion, going into A New Hope and Empire era. And here, she is the Emperor's Hand, and she is targeting Luke. And so she has a stormtrooper little super squad called the Hand of Judgment. And
so that's a prequel to the original Thrawn trilogy?
Yeah, it says, from #1 New York Times bestselling author Timothy Zahn comes a new adventure set in the time between A New Hope and Empire, featuring Luke, Han, Leia, as well as a deadly Mara Jade.
Very nice.
8 months after the Battle of Yavin, the rebellion's in desperate need of a new base, so Governor Farouz of the Kandahar sector proposed an alliance for the rebels in exchange for protection of a warlord who's intent on invasion. Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie are sent to evaluate the deal, but Mara Jade, the Emperor's Hand, is also heading for Kandahar along with the Hand of Judgment. The mission to punish Farouz's treason and smash the rebel alliance. In this treacherous game of betrayals within betrayals, a wild card is waiting to be played.
So I think that right there is something to look for, and Gio, for you to suggest to the people is, I'll give you a little behind the scenes. There's talk. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk happening on the Virtual Cantina Network about getting us a book club. And kind of like a book club show. We have comic book show. We have this show that mentions literature, mentions all sorts of media. But it's a lot of talk. There's a lot of things that wheels are in motion. Things are happening.
Very interesting.
That would be a good one to mention to whoever it shakes out working on that show.
I'd be very interested in hearing and doing more in relation to that. Because I thought that Jedi Archives could have, when the comic book stuff, the graphic novel stuff, if they don't want to do that for a little bit, they could always do novels. I always thought Jedi Archives would be
Archives that talk about that, and Archives branching out. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch in preparation for the Ahsoka show. Jedi Archives, our sister show that's on the opposite Sundays from us, has been doing watch-alongs of Tales of the Jedi, the Ahsoka episodes, and they are branching out into a little bit of a different media. But they are always your source for the High Republic comics, which we are in the next phase of the High Republic now. Things that are very different and changing. But that stuff going on over there. So other stuff going on. And speaking of stuff going on the channel, on the Virtual Cantina Network, is we have a big old change. Well, I guess this will have happened already by the time that you see this show, because we're pre-recording. There was the Ahsoka Eve, right? Is the big cross pollination of all hosts. Talking about what's out there. So if there are things that you didn't understand when you saw Ahsoka this week, Go back, check out Ahsoka Eve that would air the Monday the 21st, right before Ahsoka came out on the 22nd.
Yeah, got a preview show. You're gonna hear everyone's opinions, hopes, expectations, maybe some predictions too.
Hopes, the dreams, the predictions that are probably already dashed by the time that you watch this.
Oh yeah, Spencer needs to be silenced with his anti-Ezra speech. That's just imperialist propaganda. I mean, come on. Is he trying to get into? Is he trying to be Thrawn's hand now? He wants to be an inquisitor.
But let's keep talking about what's going on. The news from the Holonet. What else is going out? I mean, we would be completely and totally remiss if we did not mention the juggernaut that is Barbenheimer.
Yeah, what's that? How's that going? I've not seen Barbie or Oppenheimer. Twice we were gonna go I was gonna have a Barbenheimer day that didn't work out. I was a little bit unwell last week, and I was invited by a friend to a different city to go hang out and watch Oppenheimer. I said let's do Barbenheimer. She had said let's do Barbie, and I was like, what about Oppenheimer? Dude, what?
Yeah, I know you've seen them repeatedly. Is talk a little bit about the Barbenheimer just mass hysteria.
All right, I saw Barbie. I saw Barbie once.
Okay.
As of today, it is at $1,279,000,000.
Wow, that's more than all the prequels.
What?
That's way beyond like Revenge of the Sith, which was the highest tally for prequels, which was I think was 849 worldwide box
Barbie
office.
is at $1,279,000,000, and
That's
Oppenheimer is at $717 million.
Wow, I wonder how Christopher Nolan feels about that.
And Oppenheimer is already one of the if not the highest grossing R-rated movie, or it's one of the highest grossing R-rated films of all time.
Yeah. And
it also has set a record of being the most money that a film has ever made without being number one on any of its weekends. Because Barbie has been number one consistently the entire time.
That's such a weird stat, but yeah, I get it. It makes sense.
It is. Fifth highest gross. Yeah, so yeah, it is. Never mind. It's the fifth highest grossing for an R-rated film, but it's still chugging along.
Can I guess what's above it? Deadpool 2, maybe Logan.
I don't have that list on me right now, but
yeah, I'm sure there's a horror film. Get Out is probably above that.
I think both of those succeeded because they're not. I mean, yes, Barbie's based on an IP, but it's the first live-action Barbie movie. And the marketing is very unique, saying if you like Barbie, you'll love it. If you hate Barbie, you'll love it. And just people wondering what that's going to be, and a really funny trailer. Whereas Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's name behind it, and the fact that it's a adult-themed drama that's devoid of any CGI. I know because I watched the credits enough times to see that there's no visual effects houses credited whatsoever, which is probably why it's the shortest end credits in history at like 3.5 minutes. And
because they use real nuclear explosions. That's what they do.
Yeah, Christopher Nolan actually bought a planet and he detonated. He made Manhattan Project Part 2.
Blew up a small island in the Pacific.
Yeah.
There is something hugely valuable, I think, in that being, yes, not a nuclear explosion, but making practical effects. You can do these things without relying on CGI. It was done for years upon years. You can still do it, and in an updated and really cool way now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another news story broke recently that said a lot of visual effects houses want to unionize because they're fed up with studios like Marvel, which has just an excessive amount of, frankly, bland CGI because they're not disciplined at all in terms of the amount of changes they want to make, and just why CGI today, for the most part, looks worse than it did 10 years ago.
I still think Jurassic Park looks superior to any dinosaurs that you've seen.
It does.
Any monsters.
Jurassic Park holds up better. Yes,
it looks better than the newest Godzilla film.
Than current CGI in Jurassic Park. I will argue that till blue in the face. But I will also argue, Kat, that I think Barbie kind of already had a little bit of a built-in audience. It's kind of the reverse of what Disney's been doing lately, where is let's take a beloved animated cartoon and make it live action. They have taken many beloved by the appropriate age group Barbie CGI and digitally animated movies. There are tons of Barbie movies out, and the kids that grew up on those are the target audience for the Barbie movie now. They're that age level. So they've taken beloved animated content and they've made it live action.
Yeah.
Do you think your the parental generation would enjoy Barbie as much as the kind of young adult generation? Because I have not seen it, but it sounds like it's ultra meta and self-aware and very satirical and very 2023, like AI fears and what happens when you cross into the real world. And
I mean, they might like it. I mean, I thought it was a bit too on the nose to the point that I thought the movie was okay. I thought it was really funny, creative in the first half, very telegraphed and predictable in the second half, where they're literally monologuing the film's message to you, like practically breaking the fourth wall. And I get it, that's part of the joke, but I was like, okay. So I think Dave is onto something there. That's who the target audience is. It's the people who grew up watching those cartoons, as well as you have your corporate writers in there who are like, well, we need to get this reference in or this reference in, and like
we need to tick all demo boxes.
Like all the stuff that Rachel Zegler said last week that echoes of Brie Larson said when Captain Marvel. It's like corporate people whispering in their ears, we gotta say this to appeal to this demographic or that other thing, And there's some of that in there too.
I want my Gen Z millennial crossover.
Yeah. Whereas it still had this appeal that, say, something like the new Indiana Jones didn't have, because that was relying solely on nostalgia. And somehow, despite having the fewest amount of scenes in any Indiana Jones movie, ended up being the longest by like 30 minutes. And
yeah, I saw the runtime because we were going to try and sneak in a Barbie viewing today or a Dial of Destiny viewing. And I mean, here's a nice thing for Indiana Jones, because I've seen loads of doomer headlines saying, "Oh, Lucasfilm cannot believe it's going to lose like $500 million because they overspent on marketing and they haven't sold enough seats." And I'm thinking, just don't let it be 30-day windows of films in cinemas. It's ridiculous. Christopher Nolan did an interview on the BBC, which I think I mentioned last time. I hope you guys can view it. I'll try and find a YouTube link if someone uploads it. It was a full 30 minutes where Christopher Nolan's talking about the state of the world and the state of film in July 2023, ahead of the release. Genuinely, it's like 3 days before the worldwide release of Oppenheimer, and he says that he feels the biggest harm to the box office is the kind of hangover effect of lockdown, where there's only a 30-day release. He didn't say the streaming what Discovery, Warner Brothers, HBO did, which was simultaneously stream as well as release in the cinema, and obviously everyone stayed home and just streamed. But he was saying that the 30-day window still exists, where most films in big chain cinemas are only out for 30 days, and then they're pushed to the side, and a new one comes along. And he also said that there's such a packed slate this year because of COVID, and this is the first full year the industry's back, he feels, with like all guns blazing. So that's why I've got so many films this year that I've not seen. I mean, the only big one I feel like I've seen is Guardians 3, and I just saw on Wednesday Dead Reckoning Part 1. I really enjoyed it. I can talk about that in a minute. But yeah, and I heard that film was also struggling, relatively speaking, for Paramount. I don't know if that's true though.
Yeah, it flopped. It's not going to break even at all. But what he said was he congratulated the idea that there's so many movies for moviegoers to choose from. It's like, oh, it's great for them, but it's like that's not so much why the movies are failing. Because the same would have been true of Barbie and Oppenheimer, except for they're making a lot of money, so they're just leaving it there. There's still a greater built-in interest to that than, say, all these other franchise movies, which you've seen like a million times before, that they're just paint by numbers, cheap CGI, and that kind of thing.
Well, and some of the thing is I don't know.
I've not seen the Flash or Ant-Man yet, so. But I feel like that's what you're kind of suggesting is the cheap CGI and the painting by numbers.
Yeah, and that's been available to rent or purchase digitally for a month already.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I'm just talking about is it laziness of the studios or hubris or whatever is part of what is making these movies not be successful by their definition, is that they've spent way too much money on them. If they had spent reasonable amounts of money making and marketing these movies, they could have profited much more.
They could have. But I think they still would have lost money because they're still not making the money. I mean, they may have turned a tiny profit, but like the thing for a summer blockbuster, the reason they sink so much more money into that is because they're counting on it to make so much money to finance their other artsy or low budget projects and comedies or bland weekend
Woody
action
type films.
Fall, the winter, the spring, and finance their Oscar bait movies. But even if they cut the budgets, it's like these movies still aren't popular enough to make. They're not making money. It's like you said, it's laziness and hubris. They figure, we have the franchise name. That's all we need, just the tag. But I think Across the Spider-Verse is probably the only franchise movie this summer which really excelled, and like in terms of the real high quality. That wow, that really blew people away. Much better than anybody thought. Much like the first one, Into the Spider-Verse. No, that movie was so much better than it had any right to be, and the same was said of the sequel. But there is a lot of paint by numbers stuff, like the Transformers movie. I saw that. You can only see robots fighting each other so many times.
But they're animal robots. They're beasts now.
Exactly. Mission Impossible. Only see do so many.
That was the.
I love Dead
Reckoning. A major movie on a property that we created at the tail end of the toy line to try and reinvigorate the toy line that was already going downhill. So let's introduce beasts. Wait.
Yeah, I've not watched Transformers mainline film since. What was the one that had Anthony Hopkins on the trailer? The Last Night or something.
Last Night. But here's the thing.
An Extinction I didn't see either.
Was bad. It was just kind of bland.
Okay, that's not. You know what? That's high praise for Transformers now. Apart from Bumblebee.
It was also nice that it was a much shorter movie. It wasn't like these 3-hour, 2:45, 3-hour extravaganzas that Michael Bay did. This was a 2-hour movie, in and out, real quick.
Who directed or wrote it? Is it somebody known, or is it like a
I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody else. Okay. But that's the thing. This summer they've had so many big movies coming out every week. There's a lot more variety to choose from, and because of how expensive it is to go to the movies, on top of that, it's like that people are going to be more selective about it. And then, like Nolan said, the studios aren't as disciplined in terms of holding back their movies for home media release. But also, are they movies which you feel you really need to see on the big screen, especially if the CG looks really bad? Like, there's no excuse for Dial of Destiny costing $295 million production budget to look as bad in the CGI as it did in a lot of those scenes. It's like there's $295 plus $100 on marketing. So they will break even on the production budget. They will lose the $100 million on marketing. So
I mean that's really dumb. $295. I mean, was $195 Harrison Ford's salary?
But yeah, you're right though. They're spending an insane amount of money on these things. They needed. I think they'll take hopefully a good lesson from this and be more conservative with their budgets and put more thought into their stories and their work, and maybe less CG, because the CG tends to be more like, for instance, it was cheaper on Tenet for Nolan to get an actual 747 and crash it into an actual building than it would have been to do it CGI. Because
it's a great stat. It's funny that Tenet was he tried to pitch that as the film that would save cinema, and actually it wasn't Tenet. And I mean, Tenet is hilarious. I like that film for reasons that Christopher Nolan does not intend. It's so Christopher Nolan up his own crazy mind games that he just lost in the source, I feel. Tenet's great. We should talk about Tenet another time. In terms of mind-bending films that break their own logic.
Yeah. Well, and in all films too, is you're walking a line between ticking people off that are fans of the original source material and bringing new people into it. And they're falling down a little bit on the bringing new people into it. Is like, I understand the same way with Star Wars. See, we're kind of tying this in a little bit. The same way with Star Wars, it's unifying. That you've brought a new generation to Star Wars with the sequel trilogy, by having The Force Awakens be kind of a rehash of A New Hope, that by having The Last Jedi being kind of a rehash of Empire. You've had that, but you brought in with the Michael Bay Transformers movies, we've taken a beloved IP of the generation of parents and try to introduce it to their kids. But you do it in such a way that really pisses off the original generation. Because I will die on the hill of the original Transformers animated film was superior in every single humanly possible way to anything that has come after it. If you had just gone in and done a reasonably decent job of CGI making that real, you'd have made crap tons of money.
I tell you, I forgot to mention, the prologue of Rise of the Beast on Cybertron is the closest any of the Transformers movies have come to echoing that movie that you're talking about.
Because that movie,
I'll just leave after 5 minutes.
Had, Peter Cullen, of course, who's been Optimus Prime in everything, but that had Leonard Nimoy, Orson freaking Welles.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That was a huge, huge movie, and it was not completely and totally aimed at the children. There was so much for older adults in that film. I mean, it completely and totally traumatized children, as many films of the time did. But it's like, take a lesson.
Okay, here's one film from a writer-director who I love that works in the Transformers universe, and why is he not being given more films? Travis Knight with Bumblebee, starring Haley Steinfeld. Haley Steinfeld's, I think, one of the actors of the generation that's upcoming. She's excellent. She also can sing professionally and has albums and stuff, which is also a bit nuts. I know a lot of actors sing for fun, but I don't listen to her music, but I've heard her voice. She's really good. And she's a really strong lead. She's also in a film called...
well, I think the reason they didn't give it to Travis Knight is because Bumblebee didn't make any money.
Yeah, but it was also not... It wasn't... Yeah, it wasn't marketed.
It doesn't matter that the Michael Bay movies were bad if they're making $1 billion a piece.
Yeah,
true. It's same with the Fast and Furious films, right?
They were making $1 billion, and so they just kept giving them money to do the same thing over and over again, and they finally kind of ran out of steam.
Have you seen the streaming ads, like now for the Fast and the Furious series, that they're really kind of making fun of their own popularity? It's like, we've blown up freaking tanks, and now we have cars flying through the air. And I'm sitting there going, that problem with your
that's where I checked out.
I'd say the new one is probably the best one since the original.
What number 10?
Yeah, because Jason Momoa is the only person in the movie who's aware of how stupid this all is, and so he's having the time of his life.
So back to the kind of thing of that.
We need him in Star Wars. Imagine Jason Momoa as a Jedi.
Successful is that sort of thing, is that almost breaking the fourth wall, because we've seen how effectively the Deadpool movies, which blatantly break the fourth wall,
right? Because
are getting there, and people want that.
Fast 10 made almost $700 million, and it's only because of the major problems in production in the beginning when the director quit and they had to pay millions of dollars every week until they found a replacement that bumped the budget to $340 million, which was not going to be anywhere. It wasn't going to be anywhere near that high, and that's why it didn't break even in theaters and was on digital within 2 weeks. But I've got
I feel like I wouldn't mind seeing that in the cinema, just turn my brain off and watch stuff blow up on the screen.
Oh yeah, it was a fun popcorn movie rooting for Dom and Jason just living it up, and I saw it twice. I thought it was really fun. It's nice. Fun summer movie. But
I like the 7th one because there's an emotional undercurrent that is in the real world with what happened to Paul Walker, but I haven't watched anything since then.
See, this is what we're hitting on. It's a lot of some of these movies have certain undercurrents to it, or there's something there. Mm-hmm. Whereas a lot of them are paint by numbers, and they'll have one scene that tries to feel emotional, and the rest of it is just kind of ho-hum, jump through check the boxes, as it were. Whereas, Guardians 3 worked because James Gunn had total control over it. They didn't shoehorn any backdoor pilots into it, no references to all the other crap going on. It got to be its own thing.
Masterpiece film. 10 out of 10 for me.
I probably think I give it an 8 out of 10, maybe.
Loved it.
So that worked, and that made $820, I think, $830 at the box office, which is pretty good.
Nice, yeah. What a trilogy he's done so well with the Guardians.
Yeah, and
thought?
Hopefully they leave it alone
For a bit, yeah, for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, is don't keep forcing and horning content into it. You know,
well, they already said that Star-Lord will be back.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm okay
can be back
with
alone.
That, he doesn't have to be back in another. Don't force Guardians 4 immediately. Is if we want to see Star-Lord in a little bit doing something else, branching out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they will anyway, because they had a very mediocre group at the end of the movie anyway, with the mid-credit scene.
Oh yeah. No, that was. I feel like that was just.
I mean, there are things that could be done that have been done in the comics, which is, technically, if you wanted to bring back, because we have the multiverse, which means you can do anything you please. Iron Man has been a member of the Guardians. You could go with a completely different team. You could put a new Guardians together with Ironheart and some different.
I was going to say, yeah, she's.
But don't kill the Guardians' magic.
And then, before I forget, another symptom of one of the most bland summer fare I've seen is probably the one I had the highest of hopes for, which was The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which turned out to be very bland, too long, anticlimactic, not scary at all. It tries to force a somewhat optimistic, happy-ish ending to it, which, no, that chapter from Dracula does not have a happy ending, and it's not... it's supposed to be cynical, pessimistic, and dark. Right, and the monster looks too CG.
So that is why I did not...
What's the synopsis of the film? Because I don't think everyone will be familiar.
There is a chapter in the book Dracula where the Demeter, which is the ship that Dracula ships himself in his coffins from Transylvania to London, the ship becomes shipwrecked on the coast of Whitby, England, and there's no survivors, there's no sign of anybody, and the crates and the packages are in good order, so they get shipped on to Carfax Abbey, and all they find is the captain's log, talking about how every night something's been stalking them and killing them one by one, and so it sets up a potential for a really dark horror film, like Alien on a Boat, like a lot of people have been saying. Unfortunately, they treat it a lot like a slasher film, where the characters are unbelievably stupid, and even though they built like a life-size replica of this ship, the surrounding environment was too CG that it looked really fake. It was, again, too long, too predictable, too many jump scares or CG type kills, and it just...
Okay.
It had even Javier Botet, who's done a great job playing other creatures and monsters from films. He kind of has a bit of a CG-ness to the look of his monster Dracula, and it's like, this really needed the Robert Eggers touch, if you know what I mean, to be a really something dark horror. And instead, it reminded me of an early 2000s, horror attempt at horror type thing that just, I was so disappointed with that movie. I really wanted it to be great, but it feels like something that the modern executives would look at that, and it's ticking the boxes. Oh, we have the ship, we have an IP, established famous character. Oh, we'll pick the main character. We'll have him be a guy who's facing opposition because of people are racist against him because he's black, and he's got to fight the system. And we're going to check all these little boxes for the modern political landscape. Stuff, and it's like, you're making a story that's set in 1897, and you're trying to do this political thing where the black guy's got to prove himself against the other white guys on the ship. And I'm like, what are you doing? This isn't that type of story.
Yeah. Dracula has a lot of anti-colonial undercurrents anyway, because
exactly, so many.
Irish.
Dracula is a very dark racist story.
He hates England. He hated the crown, and it's about Dracula being an imperialist.
I did not see that movie at all, because know the ending, the beginning, the ending. It's a brief chapter. I think it was done extraordinarily well in Bram Stoker's Dracula. That what happened right there was just a small part of Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it was done well. You got, I think, actual lines from the book being read by Keanu Reeves as the voiceover narration of what's happening, and bang boom. Sometimes you gotta let stuff go.
Well, that could have been, even knowing the outcome, would still have been a really scary horror film if they had done it right.
Yeah. You could easily just... I don't think it's hard to make a good horror film. Just make the budget small, make the production design small, get this feeling of creeping fear.
And stop trying to shoehorn in modern political reference crap.
Yeah, look, unless I mean, it worked amazingly in Get Out is amazing.
That works really
I love
well.
that film, but you can't try and do Get Out for every horror film. You're not going to work. You're taking away from what made that film interesting and unique and kind of lightning in a bottle. And that film is excellent because every time I watch it, I'm reminded of people I've met since I last watched it, who fit into like the different categories of, oh yeah, we're so open-minded, we're so progressive, we're so liberal because we do like A, B, and C. And I'm just thinking, you guys are the horrors walking the world nowadays.
That's just it, and that's what the studios are doing. They're going down the checklist of what they think audiences want to see, but they're not thinking about what the needs of the story are and what is actually. Like, does it make any sense that the main character, the black protagonist from Last Voyage of the Demeter, survives and tracks Dracula to Carfax Abbey and says, I'm going to hunt him down and get him before it's too late, and they set it up almost like a sequel? No, because we know from the story that everybody died and Dracula successfully stowed away to Carfax Abbey and nobody was able to warn anybody about what was going on because he got away with it and killed everybody. But you're having a optimistic ending by having this guy live and go on to save the day, try and imply that he's going to go on and slay the beast type thing.
But I think people have forgotten that you can have a downer ending in a successful movie. You can have
Infinity War. Come on.
What Empire?
Infinity War. He just goes, and everybody turns to dust.
Endgame. You kill your lead character. John Wick 4. Again.
The Cowboys. I mean, it was a little optimistic after that, but like the 2/3 point when John Wayne is.
Whereas Indy, they tried to do something sort of different, not really, for the latest one. The mixed results.
Speaking of, they brought in the optimism at the end. I mean, I didn't hate that part, and I don't know how I would have felt if they had gone for a dark ending and they had, killed Indy or left Indy in the other timeline or what. I don't know. I don't know if that would have.
Well, my thing is that they ended that movie literally recycling dialogue and references from the first movie, almost like they're saying, remember that better movie from 40 years ago, rather than letting this ending live on its own merits, on its own strength, like all the other films have their own endings and aren't constantly trying to refer to what came before. And that's the thing. If they want to bring back these franchises for new generations, don't keep reminding them of the older installments because they have streaming now. They can watch the older installments whenever they want to on Disney Plus. You don't need to keep shoehorning in the references. That's why when it got to Rise of Skywalker and it was just reference after reference after reference, like, no, if this is supposed to be a consistent story across 9 movies, then the 9th movie should just be like another chapter of that story. You shouldn't be actively trying to pull in a gajillion references.
No,
it's not serving its own story.
Did not need to be.
But they already did that
because they're gonna do 10. They
already did. They already did that with The Force Awakens. So that's why The Force Awakens. I'll say it again, on record, on video, the most cinematic, disappointing anything ever. Not just for me. I think for Hollywood, The Force Awakens is so disappointing because you had a clean slate with a new generation to create a new Star Wars story. And what did you do? You got J.J. Abrams, who made I think a pretty solid Star Trek action movie, not really a Star Trek film, and then got too carried away with Into Darkness, and nobody saw the signs that.
The first Star Trek he did wasn't good either in terms of the characters were not who they were supposedly.
So that's what I mean. It's an alternate universe, individual fan retelling of Star Trek. That's how I view it. And I feel that's exactly. I mean, I don't know. What is it with these directors who say, "Oh yeah, the story I've always wanted to do is tell a Star Wars story." That's what J.J. Abrams has been saying for years before he even did Star Trek. And then he gets Star Wars and he just copies and pastes a rough, bad edit of A New Hope with worse characters and clunkier dialogue.
Well, partly in his defense, I know that some of a lot, if not the entire backstory of that movie, comes from George Lucas and the Michael Arndt script. And then I have a very strong feeling that this was more of a Bob Iger initiative because notice how one of the first things Disney did was they canceled Clone Wars. but they retained the exact same creative team for Rebels. And it's like, well, if you're going to keep the same team around to tell the same types of stories, why did you cancel Clone Wars? Because it's a prequel era show. Why do you have only maybe 1 or 2 references to the prequels in Force Awakens, but you're constantly force feeding the original television stuff? Because you're trying to separate yourself from the prequels, because the thing that the big Disney corporation took from the prequels was, they made less money and people are complaining about it. That must mean because the era is bad. It's like, no, you just need somebody who's a better writer, who enjoys the filming process. Because each of those prequel films were shot in like 2 months, 2 or 3 months, which is nothing for a blockbuster like that. Yeah, he rushed the process. And so I think that Bob Iger had a lot to do with why Force Awakens was more or less a retread, because that seemed to be the mandate. Remember when he said, every year we're going to have a saga film, and every other year will be saga, and every year in between.
It was Star Wars story, yeah.
Alone. But
see, I want to know what was the original pitch, what was the originally put out when that movie was greenlit. I want to know what happened, because we see some of the early trailers and the pieces that I think were left in a whole other movie that could have happened, like Finn's story, way more stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you bought this movie based on somebody's treatise, somebody's written script. Leave it alone.
Stop meddling. Let it sit.
Stop.
Let it cook by itself.
No executives meddle with it. Stop getting a director who's going to push just the director's. What I've always wanted to do is, no, we wrote this story. This story was bought because we liked that concept. Film that movie.
Yeah, it's funny.
Your other movie, if you think that movie's great, JJ, if you think the movie that you were trying to take out of whatever was written was great, write your own movie.
Yeah. Or do your own alias in the Star Wars universe. That's what I'm thinking. Imagine if they'd just given him that. Like they've done with Tony Gilroy in Andor. That's amazing. We could talk about that for 10 shows. How good Andor is in parts. The positive aspects of it are huge, and I think it's one of the premium streaming era shows. I think it's one of the highest quality shows I've ever watched, and that's a labor of love from an entire team who love what they're doing. You have Diego Luna, who's the main character actor, but it's, as we know from all these Disney shows, it's named after one character, so you have an in. Especially if you're a total outsider, you're like, oh, that's the main girl or that's the main guy. But it's an ensemble piece with all these other characters, which can be distracting and can be annoying to some diehard fans who think I wanted 6 hours of Obi-Wan in a desert, which I didn't want.
No.
It's you could still do. You still
show should have actually been about Boba Fett.
We weren't meant to mention the Fett show. No. But we steer away from The Last Jedi and from the Book of Boba Fett until we do an episode where we destroy both or praise both.
Well, but what I'm going towards here is, you're talking about Andor, is there is so much that can be done that we constantly discuss on this show, that Star Wars can make so many different genres of films. You don't have to make the same science fantasy kind of thing that the original trilogy was over and over again.
And not every protagonist has to be an orphan with a big history behind the parents. It's like, my God, stop.
Yeah. There's that old joke about if you want to be a superhero or main character in a franchise film, you've got to kill your parents so that you're an orphan.
Well, and
that was a meme. I didn't come up with that.
But some of the absolute hugely fun episodes that we've had, and I'm trying to redirect this a little bit because it's how we do, is we go when
some of the summer thing for a little bit of all.
Some of the best episodes that we've done of this show have been what ifs. If you've gone in and you want to make a new movie in Star Wars, you go down the line, you look at, oh, here's a little branch. Here's a little event that if it had branched the other way, what could have happened? I absolutely loved the little short Marvel What If animated series.
I thought, why not do that for Star Wars? Come on.
Yes. Why couldn't you do that for Star Wars? Or even beyond that, take those little elements. Tales of the Jedi.
Yeah, what a format. What a perfect format.
That was a great kind of thing. We're doing like little bitty shorts in there.
You could do that once a year.
They don't have an interest in, like, look at what the big shocker of last year was when Tamora Morrison revealed that the reason the Book of Boba Fett becomes Mandalorian season 2.5 halfway through is because they didn't want to pay his salary to appear in both shows, season 3 and Book of Boba Fett. And so they found it would be cheaper to bring the Mandalorian into his show because he's played by stunt doubles. And that's why the Book of Boba Fett show gets compromised by, I mean, granted, the other problems of that show notwithstanding, but the narrative gets compromised because they took what was supposed to be the first couple episodes of Mandalorian season 3 and put it towards what should have been the falling action of the Book of Boba Fett. Because they were on the one hand, they're too cheap to pay Tamora Morrison's salary to appear in both shows, but they have no problem spending $295 million on the production budget of Indiana Jones. And it's like,
who's in charge of the wallet?
No shade to Tamora Morrison, but I'm pretty sure his salary isn't that high. I mean, come on.
Yeah, no, I doubt it. I doubt it is.
And I mean, completely compromised the story they're telling because they wanted to save barely a few bucks, like maybe a couple million, if that. And then again, bringing back Grogu because Disney wants that marketing, that marketing money. And it's like, well, you could still have that character and tell that character's story with maybe he doesn't want to stay with Luke, but maybe a new character finds him and he goes off on a different adventure.
Yeah, or separate that out into something else. Is you could have made. I will argue that Mando season 3 would have been a better show if you had called it the Book of Bo-Katan.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, true.
I mean, and then you do Mando season 3 separately, and you tell Din Djarin's the parts of Din Djarin's story that you needed to tell.
I like that idea. Yeah, I always thought that. I thought the Book of Boba Fett was a nice title when they came up with it. That final epilogue scene with the badass music where you see Boba and Fennec take the throne of Jabba. It's an excellent scene. Everyone was probably thinking, okay, Scarface, The Godfather, Heat, maybe. Like there's going to be another Mandalorian who's going to like track Boba. Will it be Din? Somebody will be, or it could have been Cad Bane. Could have been like the Al Pacino to Tamora Morrison's Robert De Niro kind of thing.
That's just
so many things.
One thing, and then they go a completely different direction, which
they kind of they tease you with zigging here, and then they zag totally opposite to what everyone thinks or wants.
You can subvert expectations if you want to, but it still has to make some sense in the confines of the characters you're using and what's already been established about them. For instance, Boba Fett did a lot of dumb things in Book of Boba Fett. He kept getting hoodwinked left, right, and center in a manner that just didn't seem believable.
And the biker kids had to save his ass twice. And that was also, I can understand why there's a lot of this, like crazy male outrage Twitter user psychotic breakdown where people say really horrible things that are toxic about the cast and crew stuff. But I do think they disgraced Boba Fett, and that was very rude of them. That was very rude to Tamora Morrison, what they did with his character in that show. And the salary thing is sad as well to hear that.
I want to know if this is a trend and a tradition in like modern media. Do we think it's necessary, or do writers think it's necessary, or whoever, that people do the stupidest thing? It's almost become the horror movie trope of let's run into the basement with one exit as opposed to out the open door and into the running car. That everybody to carry a story forward does the stupidest thing humanly possible. I'm watching a show now with Genevieve O'Reilly called 10 Star. I discovered it a little bit. I think it's been around for a while, but every time you think this is going to be the last episode, they're going to finish up and tie together all these loose threads is if this guy shoots this guy, or if this guy just ends it, or if this guy does this, or nope, that's not what they do. They do the complete opposite every single time. I'll sit and I watch a lot of a more lighthearted show. Is my wife and children watch a show called Heartland. It's filmed in Canada. It has a lot of different people. It's about this horse ranch and things and these people's lives. And they do the stupidest possible thing every time.
That sounds like a CW type Canadian show.
What continues this storyline. We're done. We could have been done. It's over. We could have been done with this storyline, and we could start another storyline that could potentially be better if we hadn't done the 6 stupid things that we did that continue this.
Well, that's because they're more worried about the hypersensitivity that we can't call Boba Fett Slave 1 anymore. They're more concerned about things like that.
Oh, that's just silliness, isn't it? That's such silly little aesthetics that nobody cares about. That doesn't serve anybody.
Like, nobody cares about these things, but people, again, these corporate writers, or these corporate writers, or the corporate stooges are writing by committee. Well, we got to have this, we got to have that, because that's what the Twitterverse says, and we have this. Kind of like when Disney, on the one hand, will say we support LGBT and all that, but they won't put any openly like such characters in their films because they know they're not going to get money from places like China if they put that in there.
Middle East.
So it's like there's this tug of war going on where it's like, oh, we say we support these things, but then not really, and we're gonna make this stuff like, oh, slave, but we can't call that a bigger deal. But then you have much bigger problems in terms of your writing that's been permeating these shows that you're not paying attention to. So worried about these little minutiae
and this entire thing's like
not written by committee. Okay, Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yeah, look at this. Look at this.
Singular dude.
I picked this up recently, and I feel like they should do a George Lucas unfinished tales, or Dave Filoni should have like an unfinished tales with George, and maybe that's what he has. Guiding the Filoniverse.
I strongly suspect now George not overly withstanding on this, because George had an idea, it was great, filmed a movie, and from everything I hear, Marsha Lucas saved him his bacon in the editing. But but greatest stories like Hitchcock, like did he listen to 47 other people about what he should do with the birds?
No.
Yeah. Here's another thing. Just yesterday, I got this in the mail. Batman One Bad Day, in which they apply the Joker's One Bad Day philosophy to all these characters. Now, notice how all the names of the different writers and artists in each of these books. Guess what? They were working together, so that way there is a uniformity, and that all the stories feel consistent, and that they take place in the same worlds artistically, and the design of it, and so it feels like it's all part of the same universe, despite that you have a different team on each one, because they coordinated and they planned it out because they're smart.
Yeah,
which is why the High Republic is working and overlapping and telling a contiguous kind of story. Because like Claudia Gray and John Jackson Miller and who else but there's points. They go and they tell the same continuous story. And could you do that with a movie? Yes, you could do that with the movies. You could do that with the series. I mean, it's getting old and to the point now where people are getting over it, but that's how the MCU started.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not like the film studio hasn't done that.
Story. They got to have their own director. They got to have their own direction. But you've got Feige sitting over here going, "This is what the overarching story is. You need to tell this part of it."
Exactly.
Well, it's also like something we covered earlier in the summer when I mentioned what was the big deal about the director list for the upcoming show being leaked. And it's like, if they're worried that, like, if they consider it a spoiler to find out who directed each episode, then that tells us that they already have an expectation of what fans think of a certain director's work and who's better and who isn't. That's a problem, because that shouldn't even be an issue for the fans. They should expect all the episodes to be just as good and consistent with each other. But the idea that they're super excited only for 1 or 2 names on that list, well, then that tells you should be hiring different directors for the ones they don't care about to make it consistent and equivalent quality. Or here's an idea.
Yeah.
Hey, a guy like Rick Famuyiwa to direct the entire season. He's your most popular director right now. But
I think it's, and I don't know when this happened. I don't know how long ago this happened, but it happened a long time ago. Is you're getting to the point where the director becomes a bigger star than the star.
For the episodes, it seems like that, yeah. But for films, for major films, it doesn't seem that way.
In the original, in the OT, did we care that George wasn't directing?
No.
Did Irving Kershner do as good, if not a superior job? Was Irving Kershner a name at that point? Not for anybody.
Even a name now.
Not for anybody outside of the film community.
Yeah. And don't forget the co-writer of The Empire Strikes Back, I think, is Lee Brackett, a lady who gets forgotten all the time.
Yeah, that's because they threw out all of her stuff before. She still got, legally, they still had to give her credit, and George was going to, actually, they could have not given her credit, but George wanted to give her credit anyway, even though they didn't keep any of her stuff, because even though they didn't use her ideas, it fueled the writer's room for where the story eventually went.
I wonder if
George did that, because he's up for giving credit to people who still worked on it like crazy. Yeah. But likewise with Richard Marquand, he was nobody before Star Wars, and unfortunately didn't have long of a life after that. But they still maintained a consistency there, where the fact that your fans are more like, oh, we can't let them find out who directed this, they get really excited. It's like, I mean, no offense, but the director names on The Mandalorian aren't like big shot names. It's not like James Gunn, David Fincher, or stuff like that. So it's like the fact that they're worried about that tells them they're aware of the fact that the fans are picking up on which ones have higher quality. It's like, no, you need to have them not worrying about that.
You're picking up on the style. They're looking for any level of spoilers to that, even though we say we don't want spoilers, we kind of do. Is you're looking for, because you can tell what's going to happen in that episode if Rick directed it. You're going to tell what happened in that episode if Taika directed it. You're going to tell what happened in that episode if it was directed by Bryce. You kind of know. It's going to give you the tone where it shouldn't necessarily give you the tone. It should be seamless.
In a way, I'm happy, though, that some people are caring enough to try and find out who's writing, who's directing, because we should have enough credit equally. And this goes back to, what's going on in Hollywood right now with this.
It's nice that they're giving him credit. I mean that it shouldn't. The reason people are getting excited about it is because they know this is going to be a low quality episode. This is going to be higher quality if you get this person here or there. When really you shouldn't be worrying about which ones. Like, they should all be of high quality. Yeah. Especially when you consider the amount of money they're sinking into this. That's why I couldn't figure out. It's like, why did you hire somebody who frankly couldn't act to play Cara Dune just because you wanted to bring in some UFC people? It's like, that's the wrong way of thinking about it. It's like, hire an actor and maybe train them to do some types of fight scene, or bring in UFC people to coordinate as stunt coordinators or stunt guys to advertise that way. Like, don't hire people, because, we need to get a name to advertise this or that. It's like, no. It's like, they need to focus on the story and character. That comes first.
That was genuinely a fanboy desperate plea to get, because I think I feel as if Gina Carano's been obsessed over by a subsection of weird UFC fans for years, and she's like almost like a pin-up person. She's kind of objectified a lot because I guess she's kind of conventionally attractive in a way that some athletes aren't. And so I think Disney did that because they thought, we'll bring in, as you say, the UFC eyes, but also, tick the teenage fanboy thing for a lot of people. And we'll also have a strong, powerful alpha female woman, and give her her own show. And, wait, we can't control what comes out of her mouth. And she said something dodgy, and now we're going to scrap her and her show. Whoa, that's not an overreaction.
Some of that is the same kind of fear that they have of taking an unproven IP. Casting Gina Carano in that role was, we've taken a proven IP or her persona herself, and we've added it to this show. Is my daughter and I have been arguing recently over, Disney again casting for their live action remakes of princess movies is like, who are you going to cast? Is we're going to cast I say the name wrong every time and I apologize. Lupita Nyong'o, I think, fan casting potentially as Princess Tiana. She is way too freaking old to be Princess Tiana. Is you're putting Zendaya as Moana. Zendaya is way too freaking old to be Moana.
Get the actual girl who does Moana's voice. She's the right age and she's the right ethnicity.
Let's get new people. Let's go and actually have casting directors go out and find new people to bring into the acting and bring into the movies and make it good. You don't have to go with your stable of people that's the same. That's the one kind of thing that made the original Star Wars work. Okay, is we brought in to be the major players, we brought in a cast of relatively unknowns, right? Yes, we would go ahead and we would pick people. Okay, Obi-Wan, we're going to cast. Obi-Wan's name, this person gives it a sense of dignified immediately. Fine.
But he also was good enough to play that role. It wasn't just a celebrity cast.
Well, but still, even like a perform thing. If Moana should be an unknown. She should be someone bring off the street. You want to go with the thing? Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Okay, Dwayne Johnson is Maui. Yeah, you made the animated character to be him anyway. There's your person, but the other stuff you don't have to do that over and over and over again.
Yeah, you don't.
That's what I'm arguing is I want to see new people in these. I also don't think that you need to remake or live action make a movie that's, I mean, how old is Moana at this point? Like 7 years?
7 years.
Yeah. And it's far superior to
live actioning a movie.
Are they actually doing that? Are they actually live actioning Moana? Or is that just
that is the talk in many of the mouse forums. I don't know if that is official, an actual thing.
But... Moana is the superior Disney animation from Disney Animation Studios, along with Zootopia. They are superior to Frozen. I will defend that position.
And Raya and the Last Dragon, which is another Disney Animation Studios. That was really
good. I'll go with
I'm looking forward to seeing that. I still haven't seen that, and I was so excited to hear about the origin behind that. Because again, it's an untold kind of cultural thing, and it's dragons. Who doesn't love dragons? And I think I don't know if it did that well.
That's what I like. COVID, didn't it? This past weekend with Blue Beetle on the DC side, they cast an unknown for the lead character, and they cast some recognizable faces to play the family. Elpidia Carrillo as the mother, and George Lopez as the uncle. And they cast. Lopez. Yeah, as the uncle. It's like, hey, it's cool. It's him. But it's, again, showing a different culture, which is great because it automatically breaks the cookie-cutter sameness of a lot of these types of movies. But by making the character an unknown, it's like, let's you see the character and not, like, the lead character anyway, and, not the actor.
Yeah, let's do that. It was good that you had John Boyega and Daisy Ridley lifted up to the level of Adam Driver and Oscar Isaac. I mean, come on. Oscar Isaac and Adam Driver are maybe the two best actors from that age group. And you have them in Star Wars, and you absolutely waste Oscar Isaac. And, I still listen.
Cast, Chris Hemsworth and Chris Evans are relative unknowns when they got cast as Thor and Captain America. Whereas Robert Downey Jr. was making a comeback playing a character unlike anything he'd ever done before, and people hadn't seen him in quite a long time. So it was like a new thing.
That's a whole other argument.
It's a different thing, but it still felt new.
Robert Downey Jr.
No, what I'm saying is that it still felt new. Like, it didn't feel like
it was not like anything he'd ever played before.
Exactly.
Exactly. Even though it was very, I mean, he ended up acting autobiographically, let's be honest. But he used his past trauma to help influence his decisions as an actor. And I think Iron Man 2 actually, the stuff that Robert Downey Jr. does in Iron Man 2 is really good. I don't know why Iron Man 2 is hated as a film. I mean, I do know why, but I think it's unfairly looked down upon amongst the MCU pantheon, especially in phases 1 to 3. I don't mind Iron Man 2 at all. Justin Hammer's idiotic character, and
I wish they could bring him back. He was awesome.
Yeah, they should bring him back. They should have brought him back for Iron Man 3. But I don't mind Iron Man 3 either. I was having this discussion with a another friend who's very, very passionate about comics and the film versions of them. And he was saying that Iron Man, he actually enjoys Iron Man 3 as much as Iron Man 1, even though it's a very different film and it's very weird and doesn't really feature Iron Man as Iron Man. And he blows up all the Iron Man suits at the end. Spoiler alert. Firework display of Iron Man suits being destroyed. But it's that film is basically Shane Black doing his own story in the MCU. And Robbie Downey Jr., who was in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, great film. Worth a watch for anyone who hasn't seen it. But I think it is an 18. So parents be wary. It's an autobiography. It's a narration of Robert Downey Jr. telling a parable around Christmas involving crime and a heist and capers. And you could say Iron Man 3 is pretty much can be described like that.
I think if you are a fan of a lot of the comic books and the comic books over a certain period of time, you can accept the differences in the movie between Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 3, because Iron Man as a character has gone through many different periods over the course of his, 70-year history at this point. And they're it's the same as like Batman. There's the campy period, there's the super secret Dark Knight period, there's the when 89 movie, which was a complete and total kind of departure from the comics, and then the comics started to emulate the 89 Batman style movie, so that you can kind of support that and see how there is room for the differences.
And then you had the animated universe spin out of that.
What's that?
You had the DC animation, which is incredible.
Yes.
Right. So we can take it from this extended conversation before we get too far off topic. Is that we need to remove the corporatism and the writing by committee, where they have these little check boxes and stuff from our IPs. They need to get do not put your universe in front of your characters, which is what Universal did when they announced their whole Dark Universe thing years ago.
Oh God!
And they cast everybody in advance, and they had the big photo shoots. And the very first movie, I mean, never mind that it's turned into a basic Tom Cruise action movie, but he goes to the headquarters of whatever the society was called, and it's like, oh, there's Russell Crowe as Dr. Jekyll, but you could tell he's already transformed into Mr. Hyde. I'm like, oh, you're not going to tell that story after all. It's like, well, what are we doing here? And it's like, why are you so obsessed with? Not everything has to be a shared universe. That's another thing. We could tell different stories, like what DC is doing now, where Matt Reeves is on Batman universe and James Gunn shared universe.
And that's what we were talking about too, is cast the unknowns, because had that Mummy movie not had to have Tom Cruise in it, would it have been better?
Yeah.
Would that
Jake Johnson
franchise have happened?
Well, I think yes, because the scene, it wouldn't have been made as an action movie. Like Tom Cruise turned that into a typical Tom Cruise summer action movie, which is why it doesn't work. It's like with a lot of CGI, by the way. Whereas it's not like the movie is supposed to be a horror story, which had a hint of romance in the original from 1932, which was copied in the 1999 version with Brendan Fraser. But the 2017 one was just a typical, Tom Cruise action movie, which uncharacteristic of him had more CGI than it should have. And that's not what people
made by committee.
Do a Dark Universe movie for,
I think that film was ruined by committee. So here we go. Remove the corporatism and committees. Hire actual good writers and pay them well, and have them, and ideally have maybe auteur type people tell their own individual stories rather than big tying in multi-universe, everything fits. And then get casting directors who are good, let them to do their research, go and scout people in the real world, because pandemic is no longer, we're not all locked down anymore. So you could go driving around or go and talk to people who are passionate and be like, oh, you're trying to break into film. Oh, you have the exact everything that I'm looking for. Why don't you come to this?
And if you want to comment on, and if you want,
and find new talent in newer non-network, non-people you already own, like Disney doesn't have to just grab people from established Disney properties. Go watch this movie and say, oh, why don't you come over here?
Yeah, and if you want to comment on modern social issues or whatever, or contemporary issues in your movie, do it right. Don't just shove it in there in a place that feels awkward and talking down to your audience, because that never works.
Do it in a way that
feels organic to the story that you're telling.
Organic to the story.
Watch Get Out.
That almost the people that you're trying to get the message across to don't actually get it. You know,
that's the funny thing as well.
Let's hawk the track for a second, because I'm going to. Let's go to the original 1960s Star Trek, the original series. A lot of the people aren't necessarily getting that this alien guy that has half of him is black, half of him is white, directly physically on his face, and then I think was it that the people that he didn't get along with, the white was on the opposite side and the black was on the opposite side. People didn't get it. They were like, "Oh, well, it is a silly little space opera thing." It's like, no, they're telling you you're a racist, and that's bad.
And it does in an intelligent manner, which they're not doing today, because even a lot of the websites, entertainment websites I used to go to read film essays, are just terrible now, because they're written by people who grew up on like things like TikTok, and they can't write to save their lives, and it's just awful. Websites I used to live on, practically like MovieWeb, awful. Like I read one the other day that the takeaway from The Last Voyage of the Demeter being a flop at the box office, they said, was that, see, nobody cares about Universal's old classic monsters anymore, and that was the big headline. I'm like, no, it's like, let's ignore the fact that it got terrible reviews, that the fans criticized the hell out of it. Let's forget that it had no marketing. Let's forget that Barbenheimer is still dominating the airwaves over everything. Everything is still in the world. Nobody cares about these classic characters which have stood the test of time anymore. Like, that was the takeaway. And it's like,
what do you say to that?
My head hurt to even know that they're only acknowledging Dracula as a classic Universal monster.
Exactly.
This story literally is a chapter from a book that is hundreds of years old.
Yes, I've got it somewhere in there, a nice leather bound, but I can't find it right now because it's buried. But but you're right. It's that thing where, and same with the characters like Jekyll and Hyde. That's from a story by Robert Louis Stevenson, and
Frankenstein, Mary Shelley,
from a Disney movie.
Yeah, but that's just that's the thing. Is that the modern generations writing these things are not as educated. They can't write because they've been raised on the internet and TikTok and stuff, and didn't have writing and didn't read. And so
they just scrolled and watched reels, and then
they did audiobooks, which doesn't teach you how to read, but it's like
okay. And I'm going to stop this for a second and say that I do have a level of faith in modern TV, film, and there are redeeming hopes. We've done nothing but hit the bad points at this point. I will say, and I'm not going to mention names because we're not promoting, we're supporting of the SAG-AFTRA strike. I'm not saying who is what, but we have interviewed people on this channel who are humongous fans of the material that they are acting and writing and stunt coordinating in. Yeah. And they are doing an amazing job making content for which they are already a part of the fandom. There are those people in this industry doing their dead level best to tell an amazing Star Wars story because they are huge fans of the Star Wars. Those people exist out there. We're saying that despite this fact, some of what is happening, they are getting derailed by people that are above them and through which they have zero control. There are those people out there, and much love and much respect to those people, because you are doing what we would love to be doing, what we would try to do, or we sit here and be little talking heads about saying that this is what was happened. There are those people that are trying to be doing
and the great thing is they are willing to look. They're willing to engage with us regular normies on the internet, on YouTube, and stream with us, and then even hang out with us in real life, in actual Cantina events and family holiday vacations. That's really, really cool. I mean, maybe some of you have met some of these people in real life. I haven't yet. I kind of missed out on. I guess not everybody came to Celebration, and but going to some of these events in person, it's kind of it's old school. It's networking, and that's also what we're asking them to do. We're asking people who have the wallets and the purse strings and the reins of power in Disney, who are funding Lucasfilm, or in Marvel or DC or anything, to go out there and find emerging talent and bring that in, and create new stories, or create stories that honor what came before in a legitimate way, and not in a disingenuous, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Yeah, that's from the 2003 Sean Connery led The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Yeah, that's where that character came from.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, so let's do this quick. We've gone off the rails as our show normally does, but this being our
we were on rails. We just took a nice journey to
50th episode special. We promised to talk about some of what we have enjoyed and what we hope you have enjoyed from the last 49 episodes. So let's talk about what some of our favorites have been, and I want you guys to as you're watching this, put this in the comments. What have been your favorite episodes? What do we need to do more of? What kind of topics should we talk more of? I've already kind of mentioned it a little bit. I'll start to not put you guys on the spot because you didn't know I was grabbing that right now.
That's right.
I've really enjoyed some of the what if topics. I loved the, what if, for our Summer of Snips, we kind of like shoved it in a little bit, is like, what if Ahsoka hadn't left the Jedi Order? What if Qui-Gon had lived? I really enjoyed those. And some of my absolute favorites have been, like, speaking of cinema history in general, like kind of what we've done with this episode exactly, is taking a spot in Star Wars and then expanding that across multiple films properties. Like the Curse of the Trilogy episode that we did, or
that was really fun.
The sequels that have surpassed the original, is where we get to start talking about Star Wars, and we can talk and expound upon. I think it's obvious bigger and bigger. Those of you that have watched even this episode and what we've been talking about, we love film as a whole, and multiple film genres and properties and all sorts of things. And even though the three of us even disagree upon some particular films and genres and things, I enjoy those discussions and where those are going. So who wants to go next? What have been some of your favorite episodes of the last 49?
Catherine or me?
Probably the ones that you mentioned. What if Qui-Gon had lived? Mm-hmm. What were they thinking with the World Between Worlds, like in terms of what the end game is for that? And that sort of thing.
Discussing the Mortis arc. I think we went on to maybe 2.5 episodes purely on that, and we could do another episode on it even before Ahsoka came out, and probably once Ahsoka is out. What we think will happen with the World Between Worlds, the idea of using time and space as a kind of patchwork tapestry for characters to kind of interweave their own narratives and stories and maybe change their destinies is very cool, and it does actually resonate with some interpretations of like the universe and space and time in our world, and so that's really fascinating. And I think it's nice that some of those stories are told by the people who've been taught directly by George Lucas, so by his daughter herself, Katie Lucas, or Dave Filoni, who is, George Lucas's apprentice. Everyone knows that. And then Dave Filoni kind of has apprenticed his own people. I feel like Rick and Bryce Dallas Howard, but then also in the acting side, I feel as if Ashley Eckstein, Matt Lanter, James Arnold Taylor, Freddie Prinze Jr., Sam Witwer. I feel like they're all his apprentices as well. He's really expanded the Star Wars family by including the cast and crew. And he said that with Tales of the Jedi, one of his favorite parts was the having the family get back together to do a single project. And that's why I have hope for Tales of being a structure that we see in the future with more Tales of the Jedi, which can be from any era. And this ties back into what you asked. Some of our very early episodes, we looked at like the origins of the Force and the dawn of the Jedi, and that's an official era in the expanded universe. So going 25,000 years before the saga, the Phantom Menace, what we know as the Republic, before the Trade Federation War, and seeing that stuff reflecting, some philosophies and belief systems in our world and mythologies and the whole Joseph Campbell, Hero with 1,000 Faces and the hero's journey, talking about these concepts and applying them to Star Wars and in a wider context with a kind of literary lens and a philosophical and spiritual angle as well. Kind of breaking down the myths and legends behind these things has been really fun. And sometimes we've gone really back heavy and hard into that, and sometimes we've kind of superficially discussed it and then kind of done more of like a breakdown review of, say, Visions or Andor. But those have been fun discussions as well. And sometimes, we have to kind of catch the wave as it breaks and kind of surf on what's, in the zeitgeist and trending right now. So that's why we've got to sometimes talk about things that don't necessarily maybe immediately resonate with what our kind of original mission statement is, which is, it's called a Unifying Force because we want to see the connections in all things and see how, us as a kind of global fan community and a wider global population, there's such a wealth of diversity of idea and philosophy and belief and language and culture and art and history and music. And these things all influence what we create as people and how we live our lives. And so George Lucas took some of the essence of that from the West, with the idea of Greek tragedy and comedy. He combined that with samurai influences from the East, and then took like a little bit of like Dharma with some Tao and Buddhist influences and a few others that we can discuss, and kind of sprinkled them into the idea of the Force and the Jedi and this kind of holy spiritual order of warriors, and then created something that was kind of new, but then also really familiar. And I think that's what brings so many people together in a unified way to Star Wars, because in some ways you're talking to people about things that they might not be able to voice themselves, but they identify in, I don't know, being the scruffy nerf herder with the angry furry dog in Han Solo, or they identify as the lonely wandering old guy who doesn't really have much purpose left, but sees hope now in the new generation and thinks TikTok is not a mind virus, and Gen Z can't save the planet. There's a Ray and there's a Luke around. We just got to find them and get re-inspired by that youthful exuberance and the kind of intellectual curiosity you have as a kid. And that's actually something George Lucas constantly would say, that the summary, the tagline is Star Wars is for kids. But he'd just say that when he's fed up of trying to explain himself to people who don't have the patience to understand or listen to him properly. But really what he's saying is the same thing that some of my favorite creative people have ever said. So like Robin Williams, for example, that when you're young, you have this spark of kind of insanity, just crazy enthusiasm and passion. And you mustn't lose that, because when you lose that, you kind of dull yourself to just being overwhelmed by the trauma of life, because living is difficult no matter what the situations are and what your circumstances are. And life in 2023 is kind of, like globally, politically really tough, quite miserable, quite difficult. People day to day are going to food banks and struggling just to pay and get by. And so, something like Star Wars can tell people to reflect on, and without sounding patronizing, what you can be thankful for that you do have that is going well for you, even if it's like a tiny thing. The fact that maybe you can afford some food, you do have shelter, you don't sleep rough. you're not, wandering the galaxy in a starship.
As escapism is if you
That's the
are
other thing. It's escapism. Yeah. If it's not the gratitude aspect is like the internal, but the external is definitely the adventure, the escapism, looking to the horizon, the binary sunset for sure. Yeah.
And on that note, I think we will go into the binary sunset. We're way over our usual time, but thank everyone for bearing with us and watching along with us. Don't forget to go ahead and comment in the chat things that you would like to see at episode 51 and beyond, because we will be back in 2 weeks, as is always, with more Unifying Force discussion, be that whatever that would be about. We've got some ideas, but we want to see your ideas as well.
Yeah, so it's been fun. I'd add this 50th episode to my favorites because this has been really cool, and we've touched on a lot of stuff. And I feel like we've also brought it back to remind everybody, like who we are, what we're about, and what we want to focus on going forward. But also taking into account everything that's going on around us, in a global sense, but also in Star Wars. So that little tiny independent show of Ahsoka. That new character nobody really knows about. Well, who is she? Who's playing her? We can talk about that in the future.
Any of that, you have not been watching the virtual Cantina network. And what we are wrapping up right now being the summer of Snips.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to check out. Go search up on Google, on YouTube, on however you search for stuff. Virtual Cantina Network. If you like the content, then give a follow, a little subscribe, hit that bell, because every little extra interaction or follow really does help, and it'd be really cool to grow this page and connect with more fans, and
you can find all the other things that we've been talking about right down there at that little QR code below. Let me scan that, check out all the shows, things. So until the next time, may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you all. This is the way.